The Constitution Convention and ratification was set in Philadelphia between May and September in 1787. During the Constitutional Convention, they addressed the problems in the Articles of Confederation. At the convention, the Constitution was ratified and it went into effect. The Constitution is the base of our country and our government. Many important delegates attended this event, including George Washington for Virginia, James Madison for Virginia, Alexander Hamilton for New York, Roger Sherman for Connecticut, William Paterson for New Jersey, James Wilson for Pennsylvania, George Mason for Virginia, and many others. John C. Calhoun was born in South Carolina in 1782. He died at 68 years old in Washington, D.C. In his time, he was a politician, senator, vice president, congressman, secretary of state, and secretary of war. When he was a vice president for John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson, he tried to run for president in 1824, but did not receive an endorsement. He later resigned from being vice president in 1832 after having a disagreement with Jackson. He had an effect on the nation because he had argued with slavery as a positive thing, and that it would affect people's mindset on how they feel, especially in southern states, because he became a symbol for the southern states, representing the southern unity and nationalism.
The Compromise of 1850 was about whether slavery should be permitted to the new states after the Mexican-American War victory. The arguments failed to pass, but then they split 5 separate bills. This was written by Henry Clay. They allowed slavery in Washington, D.C., but prohibited the slave trade. California was added to the Union as a free state. Utah and Mexico were declared a territory of decision, allowing slavery based on popular sovereignty. After the Mexican-American War, Texas claimed $10 million in withdrawing parts of New Mexico, defining new boundaries. The Fugitive Slave Act was happening the same year and was in the Constitution clarifying helping slave and enslaved escape. A year after the Lincoln-Douglas debates, John Brown was living in a free black farming community in New York. He raided 55 homes of slavery proponents and murdered them. This was called John Brown's Raid on Harper's Ferry. He and his sons freed 11 slaves. John Brown was born on May 9, 1800 in Torrington, Connecticut, and he was married 2 times, and he had 20 children. In 1842, he filed for bankruptcy and became a conductor for the Underground Railroad. While he was there, he established a League of Gileadites, which helped slaves to Canada. After being found guilty for murder and treason, he was hanged on December 2, 1859. During his time, Harriet Tubman led the Underground Railroad. She was an American abolitionist. She freed around 70 fugitive enslaved people during her time in the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman was born in March of 1822. She was a slave who escaped. She died on March 10, 1913. Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, the heavily influential book, and Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin, the sequel. She was born June 14, 1811 in Litchfield, Connecticut. Harriet wrote 30 books and used her fame to petition to end slavery. She ended up dying in 1896 and was one of the greatest writers during the Civil War.
This is a story that was made in 1852, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe. It was about a man named Uncle Tom who was enslaved. He was being transported to Orleans on a boat and saved a girl named Eva from falling into the Mississippi River. She was very grateful, so she told her father to purchase him. Later in years, Eva's health declined and soon died right after she told her father to help free all the enslaved people. The father died trying to grant Eva's wish. Tom died from his new owner, Simon Lee Jury. This showed how much the Northerners were developing into a new era of change.
The formation of the Republican Party changed politics forever. There is no concrete date of when the Republican Party started to form, but on March 20th, 1854, the Republican Party became official, or that is what is generally remembered. The new party gained popularity very quickly, especially when Abraham Lincoln became the first Republican president. It is thought that the reason South Carolina succeeded from the U.S., the party started with talk from a group of upper Midwesterners who were anti-slavery and formed rapidly.
The Kansas-Nebraska Act is also known as Bleeding Kansas. The bill proposed by Senator Stephen Douglas was to organize the territory of Nebraska and also to give the choice to the territories whether to permit slavery by popular sovereignty. It overturned the Missouri Compromise and was signed into law on May 30th, 1854. Nebraska became a free state, but chaos broke out in Kansas with both verbal and physical disputes. This is also what led to the formation of the Republican Party, and what broke apart the Democratic one. Furthermore, it is what got Lincoln back into politics. Stephen A. Douglas was born on April 23, 1813. He had many important roles, such as a politician, senator of Illinois, and one of the youngest members of the House of Representatives. Douglas was also the leader of the Democratic Party and a contender for the Democratic nomination. In a history-altering moment, he debated Abraham Lincoln about a variety of political issues. Stephen Douglas died on June 3, 1861. Dred Scott was an enslaved man whose enslaver's land was in a free state. His enslaver moved around states frequently, who took a case from his home, Missouri courts, to the Supreme Courts. He died in 1858 before the Civil War. He was in his 60s.
The Dred Scott decision was arguably the most important Supreme Court decision ever made. It was announced by the Chief Justice in 1857. At the time, Roger B. Tanley was the Chief of Justice. The decision declared that enslaved people were not citizens of the United States, and that enslaved African Americans were not protected by the federal courts and government. The decision was also stated that Congress could not ban slavery in the federal territory. It was commonly said that with this decision, the Civil War was inevitable.
In 1858, there was a series of debates called the Lincoln-Douglas debates. There were 7 debates against Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas. The first 2 debates were the biggest debates of the 7. In these 2 debates, both sides accused each other of many things. These debates helped people see their political views. In the end, Lincoln lost. This played a big role in Lincoln's election because people worried that Lincoln would get rid of slavery entirely. Lincoln was the 16th president and argued as the most important one. He was born on February 12, 1809, near Hodgenville, Kentucky, and he was assassinated on April 15, 1865 at 7:22 a.m. from a gunshot wound. He was 56. Lincoln worked many jobs, such as politician, farmhand, store clerk, and ferry boat operator. Lincoln first came into politics at the young age of 25, serving as a state legislator for Illinois. He stayed for 4 terms, left in 1841, and returned in 1846 to win the Whig nomination. He went to the House of Representatives. He said, "Nothing valuable can be lost by taking time."
Lincoln was elected in 1860. He did not have the majority of the people's vote. He received less than 40% and won through the Electoral College. Lincoln was more favored in the North. Most Southerners were scared that Lincoln would take away slavery altogether, when Lincoln's top priority was to bring the Union back together.
In the northern states of America, they were not enforcing the constitutional obligation of the Fugitive Slave Act. The state of South Carolina said,
"We, therefore, the people of South Carolina, have solemnly declared that the union therefore existing between this state and other states of North America is dissolved."
They succeeded on December 20th, 1860.
On April 12th of 1861, Fort Sumter was attacked by Confederate General P.T.G. Beauregard. Fort Sumter was located in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina, and was built in 1829 after the War of 1812. The battle lasted for 14 hours. 86 Union soldiers surrendered to the Confederate States. No one died in the battle, but 2 people died during an explosion. Fort Sumter was taken from the Union for 4 years. This marked the start of the Civil War. Jefferson Davis was an extremely important figure during the 19th century. Davis was born on June 3, 1808. He was originally a congressman. After a while, he resigned in order to become president of the Confederacy. He was the first and only president of the Confederate States. After the Civil War, Jefferson Davis was arrested and his citizenship was revoked. He died on December 6, 1889.